you very much, Mr. Chairman, and all of you to be here this morning and to witness my presentation. Thanks for inviting me for this keynote. And it's, of course, Istanbul is the place, I think, in Europe and at the same time in the Middle East and even part of Africa. It's the bridge of the cultures, so we are very happy, I think, to witness all these layers of the time and to understand a little bit more how time developed. And the same I see as my duty to introduce you a little bit from my perspective in how educational technology developed. So my place is in the Netherlands, here in the eastern part. We call it Twente. It's from the old name of the Romans. They call it Tubantia. And but it was not really a place like Istanbul. We found some early remainders of early cultures, but in fact, in Holland, one of the cultural centers is Utrecht. It stems from the Roman name Ultra-Traectinum. It was across the border, and this is the place where I was studying. I was born here, and here's Amsterdam, and here's Eindhoven. I both had small jobs in these places. So to bring you a little bit further, here you see our group. The group is called Media Communication and Organization, and our main professor is Professor Jan van Dijk. He's the famous author of the books on the network society. And this is a context, and maybe new for the field of education. From education we look so much from pedagogy, from philosophy, from socialization, and here we see the group who's very busy now in robotics, how to make life bearable when we get older. We use the roboting, and you can see it's a rather young group who's quite enthusiastic on how to do it in the future. How can we survive when there are more and more elder people and less young people to take care of us? So we face a future that we need the roboting. If we think about the learning, I think one of the main theses from the 70s that learning can be a spontaneous effect. If you, as an educator, walks around, you can correct or you can lead the young generation. But in fact, if you go further, if you talk about learning, about instruction, about cognitive apprenticeship, then we need a design phase. So the design is really what we need in learning. Learning to design and design to learn better in a more effective, more efficient way. Now you can see all these terms like active learning, constructivistic learning, cooperative learning, authentic learning, intentional learning. They are all very good principles. But if you really design your own course, you might not be helped by all these buzzwords. They might be an inspiration, but you need more. And for me, the easygoing thing was to say, learning has two aspects. It's the nature of the learning. It's about how the brain works, the memory, the emotions, the physical development, and also the social aspects, the social media, and the culture of the education. Now we have the social media. It's a culture phenomena, it's a given thing. But in fact, we should always think what's the nature and how far can we go to shape education because of the cultural agreements. Now this is a kind of, for me it's a synopsis, how we from old European perspectives see the learning. You can see the same as I told, there's always a good reason for the older generation to teach the young. In this case, the young guy here is corrected. Don't steal the eggs from the birds. Leave nature as it is. Don't touch it. But at the same time, the teacher is robbed by the pickpocket here. So you can see there's always a double lesson. Those who teach, they need to learn themselves as well. Otherwise, there is no progress. And that's, I think, what happened with the computers. ICT in education was a trigger to change education, to let education learn by itself, to make new proper designs, etc. The library, the consolidation, that's what we did a lot of time for more than 5 centuries, to store everything, metadata and the information in the libraries. And it's still one of the metaphors for the World Wide Web, that we say, yes, we need all the information, make it accessible, not only climb these staircases, dangerous, but anyway, we need to have it available. And if you look to the design in education, if you make your own course for your students, you might feel in this situation that we have building blocks, we have some rules, but it's not a logical process. We call it, it's more like bricolage. It's tinkering, it's combining local available resources to make the best of it. And that's not bad. I think it's difficult to make it better if we look at it from a more systematic way. It's very hard to go beyond this. It's realistic and we should foster it, we should accept it. In fact, there is a long, and there's some of my examples they give it, there's a long tradition in making information available, accessible, by the book mills. About 14 books could be read very easily. And the same 400 years later, we talk about hypermedia, multimedia, the web, and now we have the social media, so to find the right people where we can get some information. The same is true, it's getting access to information. This has developed in the, I would say in the 70s, that we became aware that our students are not only to read all the information, they need to understand it, they need to filter it, they need to articulate, they need to build their own knowledge in it. It's called constructivistic learning. So we accept that learning is not only absorbing all the potential information, it's more than that, it's a very active position. The same is the precursor to the social media. It's already in the 16th century in Italy, the camera oscura or the laterna magica. And what kind of pictures could you see? It's similar to the cinema, you see. People, they gather, they are fascinated to look inside, but more important is the conversation between the people. And if you see the early cinemas, you were amazed to see pictures of around the world. It can be synthesized in one term. It's called the panopticon by Bentham. Kenneth Wayne was the philosopher. He said that finally our media will allow us to look from our chair in our room, to look to the whole world. And is this the right metaphor we need for education? Is this sufficient to say our students can have access to the whole world? They can access MOOCs, massive open online courses. They can open simulations all over the world. Is this sufficient? Or do we need something more? Of course we need much more. It's just a start. The problem is, if we have a compact representation, in this case of the city of Sofia, capital of Bulgaria, we can say it's all correct, it's all part of our landscape. But in fact, it's an artificial thing, because the constellation is not correct. It's too much composed, it's an artificial composition. That's why we go back to the early philosophers who said we need a conceptual representation. And this is the first we really need for our learners, that we need a conceptual overview. We need a point of view, a perspective, a synopsis, what we are talking about. Now, if you look to this representation, this is quite lucid. It's about honesty, about wisdom, all those terms are here. But in fact here, this schematic is what we do now more on the web. We see more and more schematic representation. This looks very complex, but it's for a rather simple thing. It's to buy and sell a house, in Holland at least. It's a huge schematic diagram. It will cost 2 years before all the transitions are fulfilled. So we need really compact representations, and that's why we have concept mapping, we have mind mapping. It's the idea that we need to find the most important things in mind before we can really start learning. What was a very good example? The London Underground map. You can see that the topology was given up. The distance is not correct. The distance is sacrificed to make it easier for the traveler to find the right track. You need to go from here to, let's say, here. It's easy to see where should I change to go, or should I go and take this line and change here. So it's a transitional map. And that's, I think, a good classification of what we call a concept. A concept is a change of minds. It's what we call thought jump. We understand we need something different. And that's also what I say, now we have so much information, we as teachers, we as directors, we need to do it. There is a lot of complaint that through the media people get isolated. Now you can see it's a real photo, it's not artificially composed, but even the newspaper was a medium, was very popular, still is, and it was kind of isolation. People get very isolated. They don't talk, they just read, absorb the views of the journalist. Now we have the social media. What do they bring? They bring more social connections, the social network, to this situation. They know to find the people better who has interesting opinions because of liking and because of broadcasting. If you find a nice message, a nice, we call it a viral video clip, you broadcast it to your circles, and your friends say, ah, this guy is very alert, I like him, I like his style, because he likes a certain mood of creative technology. Okay, now the overwhelming idea is that in education we typically train individual students. Here the notion is that the knowledge is not only in the people, it's always also between the people. That means that we need the connections, we need the social networks, we need the social capital. It's not only human capital, it's the social capital. It means we need to know what relationships my friends have so that I can build on that. The knowledge is also between the people. Now, in terms of educational technology, we had a long time the planning of instruction, and what we see is that we can remember what we read. Small proportions, what we hear, we tend to remember better. What we see and hear, it's even more, the half. But this is what we really learn, what we can remember. It's what we discuss with other people. It is what we experience by ourselves. Being in Istanbul is much more effective to learn about Istanbul rather than reading about it. And what gives the best memory is if we were teaching about it. Maybe you can remember your first lesson, you never forget what you were teaching at that time. So this is the real reason why we go for collaborative learning. It's because some of our students, especially the weakest students, once they are invited to teach to some younger students, even younger students, then they become in a different position and they experience a total different attitude. So think about it. Weaker students, give them an active role so that they become young teachers, in fact. Sounds contradictory, but in fact it's a big solution. One of the points I would like to bring forward to you is that what we typically do, we make education more and more sophisticated. We make instruction, we prepare everything, it's the curriculum, we prepare the testing, and finally, students, they learn about many isolated facts that you think is important, but it's not part of their own mindset. Now, what I want to show you is my experience when I was so lucky to be in Japan 2 times in a half a year. You can see here part of the campus. Do you recognize? It is what students do after being tested. They have to work a lot, memorize, and then there's the test. And after the test they feel very relaxed. They say, let's now make our own world. Our food, our music, our poetry. And if you are lucky as a professor, they will offer you the meal that they just prepared by themselves. And this is the typical thing, that there is a double world. The world of the instruction. We arrange what they should learn. And then afterwards they say, now we are free. We continue our real life. And they make their own world. And that's the price of arranging education more and more. Very close to Sapporo, the previous picture, is this picture, the university in Hakodate, where there is no lecture hall. If you look very carefully, you see project spaces everywhere. Where are the teachers? Well, the teachers are in industry to find interesting jobs for the students. So in fact, higher education means finding the job, and the last step, to train so that you will fit in that industry. So they do their projects here. Of course they need to learn to accommodate it and to go to the future, but in fact the teacher is in the background. So remember this is the price of traditional education. It's top down, it's system, pushing the system, but here we say students should be their own learners. We prepare them for lifelong learning. Now, in terms of media, I make a jump. I say, well, because the presentation is about tablets. Now, the Fatih project here in Turkey is very famous all over the world. So many tablets in the schools. And of course, we have to think, what is changing? This is the picture of when we were young in the 60s. We were sitting around the TV. And nowadays they sit around with the mobile phones. You can say, yeah, they are a little bit older, but in fact it is the same situation. And what's the real work? The real application of the learning is the work. You make use of your telephone. Without telephone you are lost. You don't know when the train is leaving. You don't have the contact with who's coming to fetch you from the airport and whatever. But we still see that in the schools, in the real school hours, there is a drop in using the media. There's not too much TV, there's not too much radio, there's not too much journals, and mobile phones, they are very low penetration here. That's why Fatih project is so important. They try to make an attempt how the tablet can be really working in the school so that students feel ownership of their own learning process. So is it a matter of giving them freedom? I think it's more a matter to make teachers start what's essential in the learning process. I give you some pictures. So you see that collaborative is there because students, they help each other very quickly to understand how the tablets work. And there's all types of variety. It's not so important that the level of the achievement is similar. They can learn from each other in many ways. Even diversity in terms of age and social background and ethnic background. Diversity is good to make the learning more rich. Now, can we say we are throwing away the books? Not at all. We need the good books. It can be the real books, it can be the books in the tablet. It's all part of the same game. So we have a lot of access to the books. It's cheaper, it's more manageable. And the question is, what do teachers need? The year before, the teachers, they say, we need more PCs in the classrooms. But then the scheduling is a hell of a job, because you need to find, if I'm teaching my history lessons with the computer, this time I need to be in the computer class. So this is the worry of the teachers up to very recently. Nowadays, the most obvious need teachers say is each student should have his own tablet PC. Not so much the telephone, is too small screen, but the tablet is a good I think, combination of the laptop and the new interactive, the smart media. Now, what are they doing with the tablets once it's there in the classroom? Sharing screens. Because once there is diversity, students learn in their own way. They need to combine what they found. So they can walk to each other. It's easy with the tablet. But in fact, it would be good that the teacher could say, on my screen, in the plenary screen, I allow you to make your outcome, what's your view. So that's a didactic need. We need to work at this. Also, we need to broadcast messages to student devices. So once I have a solution as a teacher, I need to broadcast it to each of the students. That's very needed. And also students to display work to the whole class. So sharing screens can be between students, and this is to allow one student to make it plenary what they found. And there is more. Okay, so there is an enormous increase of tablet PCs, and even students, they have themselves. They call it bring your own device, BOID. Still for the teachers, the big challenge is that there's a lot of equipment coming in the school. How to accommodate, how to integrate it in your lessons, in the curriculum, in the testing idea. So we need some good methods. How can you learn? Now what we see is that students are creative by themselves. The first time when you give them freedom, they might start gaming, they might start emailing, they might start finding websites that we don't like to show them. But in fact, the students, they are creative, and once they acknowledge there is an examination, they will do their best to find the best way. The only thing is that if you do that, they will work together a lot, and typically in the front, the teacher is always in the front, except here the teacher will be walking between the students to give them ideas and to let them learn. And here you can also see that it's not only the tablet, but also the books and the paper, the handwriting, still is important. So it's a rich process. And you can see many cultures, so we need teachers to learn from each other, the best practices. There are no books yet how to use the tablet in the classroom. Maybe very few books, but there are many more solutions. So the best is that you make open video lectures so that teachers can show their solutions, how they organize the classroom. There's no alternative. There are no traditional books on instructional design, how to do it. We need to find it out. You can see here many solutions. In fact, you can see there's a question how the teacher works in this. We need lesson plans. We also need to process the student progress. And we have the counselors, how to optimize learning. We need the tutors. Parents will play a big role. I think continually, parents, they get more and more worried about the capacity of their own children. So they also will use the tablet to learn what is important in the school at that moment, the role of the parents. So it's a multi-actor process. What's my main concern? What can go wrong in all of our projects, also maybe in the FATI project? One problem that we learned we should avoid is that the teacher is just teaching about the media, and the students, they learn from the media. So for the teacher, this is a very inconvenient process, because the teacher, what is teaching? Teaching about subject matter, about what's important, what we learned before. This teacher is taking the pure ideas, projecting, talking about this narrative skill. That's what we call good teachers nowadays. This teacher feels handicapped, talking about something she's not so familiar with. We should avoid that. So students can do it by themselves, but the teacher should stay in this typical role. One of the complex, I just found it yesterday on the web. It's not possible to say, go to page 15 on your tablet. There are no page numbers. So there is a new language how to do it. We need to find ways for that. Here was the solution. They make certain drawers to remove the tablets. Say, now stop with the tablets, bring them in your covers, and we are talking about books and do other games. So that the medium, many times, we did a lot of work in the 70s, 80s, about interactive video simulations and whatever. In many cases, the innovation becomes a poor development because we were too much obsessed by one new medium, such a thing, or the overhead projector, or the interactive video. It became too much of the same. We need diversity. So it's also good to say we need also the situation, get rid of the tablets at a certain moment. But in general, I think teachers are very happy to see how students get enthusiasm, how they show their results, etc. Still we have the traditional searching is important, email still is important, and that's why I opened with social media. One of the big questions we have now, to what extent can social media help schools, help students, help teachers to know about better practice? So we need the social communication. In general, we said we have social chatting, like in the lobby or something, and we have the real learning, that's here. It's not true, it's the same. Because I'm one of the guys from the lobby just talking here. But in the face-to-face communication, we can do more rich, interactive learning. So we need social media, that's why we need email, we need Facebook, we need LinkedIn and all those systems. We need to find out how to make the best of it. Students are very keen on that. And if you give them some freedom for 2 or 3 weeks, they get saturated by overdoing, and you come back to the balance of doing it among other things. You can see it was the same as the TV in the 60s, that don't be too much afraid. There are big differences between the students. You can see that, for instance, we have the tablets, how the boys use the tablets, how the girls use the tablets. We see a certain difference. In general, girls, they learn better, more disciplined. They dedicate themselves to what the teacher finds is important. But in fact, you can see that if you see reading from the paper compared to reading from the tablet, that girls do a very good job. In fact, the actual performance is very high. It's close to the perceived performance. With the boys, they have a lot of perceived, they think they learn. But in fact, they learn only a small part. So this, I think, what nature gives us, so we need to accept that. We did our research a few years ago, and we found there are the 2 types of learners. The first is the serialistic learner. That's what we call the normal, the easygoing learner. He or she can just learn the normal order, the chronology of the information. But these are so-called complex learners. Why? They learn in a concentric way. They cannot learn in the linear way, because they just forget what was in the mind just before. They are meaning-oriented rather than reproduction. This is reproduction-oriented. These are meaning-oriented. Now you can say, what is this terrible? Why is this happening? It is because of lack of short-term memory. And now in the short track, this is a disadvantage. In the long track, it's a blessing. What happens? These students, they need to reconstruct all the time. What did I know before? How can I compare it? Is there some analogy, some metaphor from what I know? And this is deep learning. We call it deep learning. It's more learning for problem-based learning. It's much better in the longer term. They remember in the long term, they remember much more because they had to give so much effort. So don't scrutinize them, don't push them out of the system. They are our future because they are combining all the information and they might find solutions for the future. Well, this, what we already did. Easygoing synthesis is, if students don't learn the way we teach them, let's teach them the way they learn. So for the holistic students, we need to make problem cases so that they can really work. Think about Hakodata, where the teacher was stepping back and saying, these are your projects, you have to manage that. I'm not going to be the conductor of this process. I can help you, but just if you ask me. It's your job, it's your learning process, it's your future. And this is, I think, the wisdom of Kenneth. Now there are still some ongoing misconceptions to say students learn best when they sit upright behind a table or a desk. It's well organized. It's not true. If you look to what students do, even sleeping is part of the learning. We found out that sleeping is a very important stage. A short nap, we call it the power nap. But I know we as teachers, we don't like it. We say, don't you like my story? Yes, I do, but I was just integrating what you told me before. So don't get too pessimistic. Also, we say students learn best in a well-illuminated area, otherwise they damage their eyes. I think this is not proven that it's bad for our eyes. If they need more light, they will go to the light, but it's not really to be worried about. The students learn more and perform better in an absolutely quiet environment. It's not true. They turn on the radio, and the TV, and the telephone. They do many things in parallel. It's hard for us to understand, because our mind is now different compared to 40 years ago. So be relaxed. They find out their way of learning. We also think students learn difficult subjects best in the early morning when they are most alert. Yes, for us it's the case. For many of the holistic students, they start learning only in the evening hours. Sorry for that. We have to open the schools more. There's a nice example where teachers in our country, in Holland, they have so-called opening hour from 7 to 8 p.m. in the evening, when they start the homework. Because then the students only meet the real problems. So they open their Skype or their telephone line or email, and the teacher is available for 1 hour to get them start learning and to remove any roadblock. It's amazing. It works really good. Also, a nice anecdote is that we have a so-called learning web. Learning web is to do the homework better. It gives exercises, and we found out that students were so eager to learn the learning web from 7 to 8 in the evening. And we asked, why do they do it? And it proved it's not because they like to do homework, but to get rid of the parents. So if the parents say, please help us to clean the table, they say, no, I need to go to my learning web. So the parents, okay, do that. I will do it myself. The table. So it's all proof that students, they are much more creative, and we are just standing at the side. We are encouraging them, but sometimes we even don't understand them. Generally, the older students, the easier it's for them to adapt to the teacher style. So typically we think that if a student is more resembling the teacher, he's more successful. It's not the case. The students who want to be like the teacher, they like to accommodate, but they are not creative students. So the so-called difficult students, those are the talents in general. Students who do not sit still are ready to learn. Are not ready to learn. Well, we don't believe it. The whole group instruction is the best way to teach, without. We even think that teachers who make very clearly stated objectives, followed by detailed step-by-step sequential explanations, and the students understand what's being taught. We think this is the best way. It's a push way, it's a kind of delivery mode. It's good for the teacher, but not for all of the students. Truancy means if you go hooky, if you escape from school. We think this is because of lack of information. Mostly it's because students feel, I need to learn a different way, so they go away. I think we have three modalities of learning. We have the real learning, what we do in the school, we have the playing, and we have the working. And those should go together. I don't mention here gaming, Personally, I don't believe in gaming, because gaming is to win. Playing is being open to learn in unexpected ways. How much time do I have? 5, thank you very much. Now, one explanation that schools, education in general, they, if we compare it with medical care, this is the operation room nowadays, very recently, beginning of the century. This was lecture hall in the 1800s, and the current lecture hall is almost similar. So what happened? We have still the same thing. We have audience, we have the lecture, but the essential thing is the same. So I think we are looking to benefit more from the technology, like in healthcare. Here there are many more people, specialists, anesthesia, people who prepare the diagnosis in the laboratory. So we need a more rich learning situation. I think this lecture hall is not the big solution for the future. What do we need? We need to design the education of the future. We call it conceptual design. It's a very fuzzy process, like the bricolage I showed in the beginning. This is the traditional way. We analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluation in between. This is not the way it's working. In fact, we have the next problem. We have the conceptual design, which has an enormous impact. And we have the production design to make the real learning material and the learning procedures. And here, for the production design, there's a lot of tools. So that's okay. But the impact is here in the conceptual design. What do we want? What's the nature of education? We don't have the tools, almost none. And still we are talking about a very large impact. How to do that? Let me give you some examples. This is a typical sequence that I'm using. Existential analysis for the students, conceptual representations, metaphoric rendering, think about analysis, structural design, navigation, and 3D environments. Let me give you this example. It's a typical picture that I use for my students when they think about urbanization. I'm not going to talk for 2 hours about urbanization. I give them this picture. How to build the city of the future. We are talking about smart cities. They look to it and they write an essay or they make a discussion. What's the message here? My question to my students is, what's the question behind the picture? And of course they come up with criticizing that if you just plant the cities, it's not necessarily becoming a human community. So this is just one example. Another example, in the recent Dutch history about connectivity, the train system, there was a new fast train, and the discussion was, should we have another second track for the fast train? Of course, the journalists were very keen. They said, no, you can't do it. We have a very small area in Holland. We are spoiling the landscape. We call it the green heart of Holland. Don't do it. But then one journalist came and he drew this picture, like the train should speed up on the same track. It's dangerous, we should not do it. So it was called a non-problem, and the parliament decided after 1 week to say, yes, we need a second track. So it means that certain pictures, pictorial thinking, can speed up the mind and make the students to find the real solutions. Same here, I asked them, is this picture about medical training, anatomy? No, it's not the case. Just to say, if you want to express your love, don't do it in the wrong way. It's not successful to conquer the heart of the lady in this case. So what's happening? If you look to the social media, we have a top-down process in the traditional way. We have corporations who make ideas. We have a kind of colonization process, and we have the consumer. This is history. If you look now to Hewlett Packard, for instance, they make all the cameras and the scanners, whatever. They don't use it. They don't use the top-down approach. What do? They say, yes, we have an idea, but the real laboratory is in the users. They find out the solutions. So the same is for education. We don't only use the top-down Institute for Curricular Design. We are designing ourselves. Even our students are co-designers in this process. There is a journal, if you like. My wife, Margriet Simmeling, is here. She's one of the editors of the journal. It's a nice journal. We have some sample copies, some flyers here. If you like it, feel very welcome. Maybe you like to write your own experience in this journal, and we will be happy to have it reviewed and hopefully very successful. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much for your speech. Now I kindly invite Professor Rahmettin Alkan to the stage to give Mr. Kommers plaque of appreciation. So, dear participants, our opening and plenary session has been ended. Now you are invited to welcome coffee in the hall. At 11 o'clock, the parallel sessions will begin. Thank you very much for your participation.